Each of these artists at one point was on top of the world, all anybody could talk about. But now, they're irrelevant. They've fallen off. And most people think that falling off just happens. Bad luck. But what if falling off wasn't random chance? What if there was a formula to falling off? A guide that if followed would guarantee that you fall off. And if you avoided it, would guarantee that you never do. The Artist Falling Off Guide contains 6 key reasons for why any artist falls off. Each reason will be examined through the lens of a different artist and their story. And you'll realize that every single one of them fell off for a reason that's within this guide. I've spent years studying why artists rise and fall, and once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. And then, at the very end, I will show you the one artist who avoided all 6. An artist who should have fallen off, but has instead become one of the biggest artists in the world. But to understand any of that, we must break down the guide first. We'll begin with SoFaygo. SoFaygo went from having the largest song on TikTok and a song that accumulated over 300 million streams on Spotify to his latest single getting 1/300th of that amount in 5 short years. What happened? Andre Burt was born on October 3rd, 2001 and was 9 years old when he recorded his first song, experimenting in his friend's basement. And by high school, he knew that he wanted to be an artist and he committed to it. But at this point, nobody cared. He was just a kid in a sea of aspiring SoundCloud rappers. But after grinding, in 2019, his fan base began to grow and people started to pay attention. He released his second mixtape and was discovered by Internet Money, who at the time was huge. They had discovered Lil Tjay, they were working with Juice WRLD. Internet Money was who you wanted to be discovered by. A huge group of producers out in LA making hits. And it was during this time, through Internet Money, that he met Lil Tjay. And together, they made Knock Knock. But despite coming out in 2019, it took almost a year till everybody was on their phones, locked away in their rooms during the pandemic for the song to actually blow up. Because back in 2020, using TikTok to promote your music was unique. And with his unique sound and vocals, the song went viral and was soon certified platinum. And shortly after, SoFaygo was discovered by Travis Scott. And in February 2021, SoFaygo signed with Travis Scott's label, Cactus Jack. SoFaygo had the viral hits, the industry connections, and he was signed to Travis Scott's label. What could go wrong? Well, unfortunately for SoFaygo, he made a mistake. Because instead of following up Knock Knock's momentum with a project shortly after, he waited. Not a good idea in the fast-moving social media world. And despite teasing his album, Pink Hearts, in May of 2021, calling it a masterpiece, it was not until 18 months later, in 2022, that it actually came out. And not only was the music mediocre, but at this point, nobody even cared. The moment had passed. The fans who had been waiting for SoFaygo to drop, they had moved on. They were listening to new artists. And SoFaygo, the kid who had everything that he wanted on paper, sold the bag. Because he gave fans nothing to hold on to. Just the promise of a masterpiece. Despite falling off, SoFaygo has dropped a few projects since, including Go Plus, which actually I listened to and I thought was pretty good. But none of the songs have even crossed 10 million streams. And in 2025, Travis Scott also still felt an obligation to give him some moments in the spotlights. He was featured on 2 tracks, MM3 and Contest, on Jack Boys 2, but at that point, his moment was long gone. And that same year, he admitted to being frustrated about the direction of his career, telling magazines that he felt the fire again. But the only way that you could admit you feel the fire again is when you're admitting it was gone. But next, we're gonna talk about someone who had an even bigger cosign than Travis Scott and wasted it even faster. Destroy Lonely was born on July 30th, 2001 in Atlanta. And being from Atlanta during this time, he already had hip hop blood in his veins, considering Ludacris as an uncle and touring with his father while growing up. But alongside this, he had some early traumas. He was homeschooled in 6th grade, and from 9th to 10th grade, when he was back in high school for a short stint, he abused Xanax, feeling that the drug was destroying him, which ironically was the origin of his name. So he took this new persona to SoundCloud in 2015 at the age of 14, and he got to work. And for 4 years, nobody cared. But in 2019, Destroy Lonely released Bane. Yet similarly to SoFaygo, it didn't become a viral hit until much later. But Lonely continued working, and in December 2020, Playboi Carti noticed him following the Oh Yeah music video, signed him to Opium in 2021. And in December of 2020, he appeared in the Sky music video. Then Bane went viral, and in 2022, his mixtape, No Stylist, hit the Billboard 200. At this point, Lonely had momentum, and unlike SoFaygo, he acted on it. He released If Looks Could Kill in May 2023, only a few months after No Stylist, and it hit #1 on Apple Music in 24 hours and number 18 on the Billboard charts. But Destroy Lonely made the second mistake in this guide, and it wasn't a strategic one. It was personal, and it was bad. Sure, he had a couple cool associations. He had some decent branding. He had fashion. He had the opium aesthetic. He had an obsession with designer clothing. But cool is not a connection with fans. And unfortunately, when you do something that is kind of frowned upon, this coolness can evaporate overnight. On June 24th, 2024, Destroy Lonely's ex-girlfriend posted domestic abuse allegations that he cracked her head open in Germany by pushing her into a bed frame, choking her, and threatening to kill her with a knife in hand in front of others. She posted photos of injuries and said he had been charged with simple battery in Georgia back in 2023. But of course, Destroy Lonely denied the allegations, saying they were false, and saying that everybody knows the true story. But it only got worse, because a Destroy Lonely begging video leaked, which became a TikTok and Reddit meme overnight, and this quickly destroyed all the aura and image that he had built. Lonely's brand of mystique and cool detachment evaporated. And because the controversy exposed him, and because there was no real personality or genuine fan connection underneath to survive it, the music had nothing to land on, and it went down right with him. Despite this, he kept releasing. He appeared on Off the Meter with Playboi Carti and Ken Carson, and he released 2 projects in 2025, but none of it has performed in the way that his music in 2023 did. And when the aura went away, there was nothing behind it. So while Playboi Carti got him in the room, Destroy Lonely's own allegations and surface level mediocre branding with no fan loyalty made him fall off. Montero Lamar Hill, better known as Lil Nas X, was born on April 9th, 1999 in Atlanta. But by the time he was in college, life wasn't going so great. Not only had he dropped out, but he was living on his sister's couch. And despite promoting his music on Twitter, he was barely getting a reaction. Since Lil Nas X was making music, he needed beats. So he went to BeatStars, a beat marketplace, and found a producer named Young Keo selling a beat for 30 bucks. And Lil Nas liked it, so he bought it, recorded on it, and released it on December 2nd, 2018. The song was called Old Town Road. Lil Nas X's internet experience and music pursuits served him well. He was an early adopter of TikTok, and so early in 2019, he heavily promoted his song on the platform, and the song made it to the country charts. But interestingly, Billboard didn't feel like it was a country song, so they removed it in March 2019, saying it didn't embrace the elements of today's country music. And this resulted in a huge controversy, which for Lil Nas X was fantastic. It boosted the song. And not only that, but Billy Ray Cyrus, a country legend, heard of it as a result, hopped on the remix, and Old Town Road spent 19 weeks at #1 on the Billboard 100, which is a record still held to this day. Then he came out as gay while holding the #1 record. And even today, Old Town Road is one of the highest certified songs in US history at 17 times platinum. And after this, Lil Nas X was everywhere. And he got to work. He was featured on Forbes 30 Under 30. He received 2 Grammy Awards. His album Montero debuted at #2 on the Billboard Hot 100. He had 3 #1 hits. Lil Nas X was at the top, but 2021 was where things started to slip. You see, Lil Nas X built his entire career up until this point on gimmicks. Part of it in 2019 was luck with the country album Billboard disputes, but in 2021, he decided to take this gimmick strategy and apply it with full force, but it backfired. The lead single off his debut album in 2021 was called Montero. While it did debut at #1, the music video tells a much deeper story. 1. Lil Nas X is seen sliding down a pole from heaven to hell. 2. Lil Nas X gets a lap dance from CGI Satan. And not only that, but he partnered up with the company MSCHF and he sold 666 Satan shoes at $1,018 each, all of them containing a drop of human blood. And crazy enough, they sold out in under a minute. Of course, Nike was not okay with this, so they sued MSCHF for this. and Lil Nas X then turned this controversy into another rollout. Now, let's look at what's happened to Lil Nas X since all of these gimmicks and controversy. Since 2021, Lil Nas X has released one album in 2025, but that album has a combined 50 million streams on Spotify. And while to you and me, that might seem like a lot, it's absolutely nothing for Lil Nas X. And it does not compare to his album from 2021, not even accumulating 1% of what Montero accumulated. Unfortunately for Lil Nas X, when most people think of him, they're not gonna think about his music. They're going to think about him getting a lap dance with Satan. This is a terrible image to have. And of course, it's a gimmick. And gimmicks don't last. People move on. There's no relationship that's built with a fan through a gimmick. And not only that, but Lil Nas X unfortunately has been dealing with some health issues as well. It started in April of 2025 when he announced that he had partial facial paralysis. Despite Old Town Road being brilliantly engineered and incredibly lucky, and Lil Nas X proving that he also is not a one-hit wonder, the gimmick-based promotion and reliance on viral spectacle and controversy to drive each release shaped how people perceive him. And while it was negative, he did it to himself. Of course, his career had already stalled before any of this, but add on top all of the mental health issues from 2025, and unfortunately for Lil Nas X, he's fallen off. Next, someone whose problem wasn't a gimmick. It was something simpler, but in some ways worse. The culture just didn't like him. Lil Tjay was born in the Bronx in 2001 and had a particularly troubled adolescence. He not only had problems in school, but also experienced a 1-year juvenile sentence for robbery. But if you ask Lil Tjay how he feels about this, he's gonna respond to you like it was positive. He credits it with focusing him and also where his songwriting peaked. So after developing his songwriting abilities from these juvenile tendencies, he released his first single at 16 years old on SoundCloud in 2017 and never looked back. By 2018, his single Brothers had gone 3 times platinum and he signed with Columbia Records. The momentum continued. In 2019, he released Pop Out with Polo G, hitting number 11 on Billboard Hot 100, and today it is 9 times platinum. FN was his first solo Hot 100 entry, and his debut album hit number 5 on the Billboard 200. With this newfound stardom, Tjay took advantage. He released Destined to Win in 2021, and Calling My Phone peaked at number 3 on the charts. He also had huge collaborations with the late Pop Smoke, including War and Mood Swings. At this point, he had become a leading voice in the melodic New York drill scene and was headlining shows. But things became deadly for Tjay. On June 22nd, 2022, he was shot 7 times during an attempted robbery in Edgewater, New Jersey, at a Chipotle, and was airlifted to Hackensack University Medical Center, put in a coma, and he underwent emergency surgery. But he survived, and he came back with Beat the Odds. Shouldn't surviving something that almost killed him cause his audience to be fully on his side? But they weren't, and instead of building on that goodwill, his behavior destroyed it. First came his comeback album in 2023, where he only sold 22,000 first week. Then came the Blackboy Max situation. Blackboy Max, if you haven't heard of him, is a popular Twitch streamer who makes music, and he invited Lil Tjay and 504 into his Airbnb. During the stream, everyone was having fun, having a good time, making music, and Tjay and 5 started smoking in the Airbnb. Max politely asked them to stop to prevent the fire alarms from going off, but of course, the rappers didn't listen. Tjay had felt disrespected, so he continued to smoke. And then, unhappy with Max for asking him to stop, he left, along with 504. Max later hopped on his stream, stating that he couldn't tolerate the disrespect, but Tjay went on his own stream to retaliate, claiming that he almost smacked Max. Almost unanimously, the internet took Max's side here. They could see right through Tjay's unacceptable behavior. I remember when this was going on, I remember looking at Lil Tjay, I was like, what the hell are you doing, Lil Tjay? Like, you sound so irrational. And this, unfortunately for Lil Tjay, caused a lot of negative associations for him. Despite surviving something that should make the whole world root for you and love you, he kept giving everybody reasons not to like him. And since then, not only has Lil Tjay's deal ended with Columbia, but 2026 has not been off to a great start. With an album coming out, Lil Tjay hopped on Instagram saying that he handled the Blackboy Max situation wrong. Okay, good, taking accountability. Despite this taking over a year, But isn't it ironic that he did this just as his album was coming out? And not only that, but only weeks after, he was begging not only Max, but tons of other content creators to react to his album. And everybody clowned on him as a result of this. And because his album simply wasn't pulling any numbers. In 2025, Lil Tjay stated that he had almost slapped Max, but in 2026, he was begging Max to react to his new album. Then, after the numbers didn't do well, he defended himself, saying that he has learned to ignore public opinion. But Tjay would not have had to ignore public opinion if he was simply a good person. The public could be on his side. But instead of that, because Lil Tjay just doesn't seem like a good person, he has found himself in the opposite situation due to his reckless behavior that he cannot seem to take accountability for. And as a result, he has fallen off. Next, someone who had the talent, the lyricism, the fan base, everything except the willingness to grow. Polo G, a Chicago native, was born on January 6th, 1999, and raised in the Marshall Field Garden Apartments on the north side of Chicago. After graduating high school, he was accepted into university, but decided not to go. Polo G used pain as his primary subject of lyricism. He took inspiration from all the other Chicago rappers, such as Lil Durk, Chief Keef, and G Herbo. Having always made music, Polo G released his first song on SoundCloud in 2018. Soon after came Finer Things, and before long, he had a number 11 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 with Pop Out featuring Lil Tjay. Then his debut album peaked at number 6 in 2019, and it was highly praised by music critics. But 2020 was his peak. His album, The GOAT, hit number 2 on the chart, was almost unanimously liked by everybody in the hip hop community. And then after that, he became even bigger. And in 2021, his single Rap Star debuted at number 1 on the Billboard charts. And today it has over 1 billion streams. But the songs on Hall of Fame, his project from that year, they all sounded the exact same, which is the 5th mistake of this guide. Hall of Fame was not received well. Fans started calling him Mid-G and Piano G because every song sounded the same. They began to blend into each other, and critics agreed, saying it was tired ambition with overly simplistic production. For almost all artists, their sound naturally evolves. Their life experiences change, and as a result, they make different music. But for Polo G, he had fallen into the trap of knowing what's working, but not even attempting to innovate. And after this, Polo may have thought the issue was that he was releasing too much music, so he took 3 years off before his next album, Hood Poet. But the problem was not the volume, it was in the repetitiveness. Hood Poet, his 2024 album, debuted at just number 28 on the chart and only sold 24,000 first week units. Overall, was received negatively. Slant magazine even called it a stubborn adherence to his comfort zone, noting that he shows little interest in pushing himself. And fans could tell, why listen to something that you've already heard 1 million times? Album after album with the same melodic guitar and piano, laced with emo trap, with the same flows and emotional topics. Hood Poet even tells us the formula, as it's a backronym. He overcame obstacles during pain or emotional trauma. Hood Poet. That's shit crazy. Now, still putting out music to this day, Polo G released a deluxe to Hood Poet in 2025. And his latest single actually came out just a couple weeks ago. But guess what? It sounds like everything else. He demonstrated he could evolve through singles and standout tracks on the GOAT, but he chose the formula, has still chosen the formula, and seems to continue to choose the formula. Next, maybe the most heartbreaking one, an artist who did everything right and still lost the very thing that made him great. Roddy Ricch, a Compton and Los Angeles native, was born on October 2nd, 1998. While he didn't discover rap until 16, he financed all of his own bedroom studio equipment with an uncle teaching him along the way. And 2 years of grinding later, he started uploading his music in 2016. But it would take another 2 years for his career to take off with his song Die Young. Written hours after X's death, it was his first Hot 100 entry, and led to co-signs by DJ Mustard and Nipsey Hussle, who he ended up collaborating with on Racks in the Middle in 2019, which won a Grammy. Later that year, he released his debut album, Please Excuse Me for Being Antisocial, which debuted at number 1, and it stayed there for 4 weeks. Then, while the world was at home, TikTok discovered the box. This song was everywhere. It was number 1 on Billboard for 11 weeks, certified diamond, and currently the video has 780 million views. But it didn't end there. He was featured on DaBaby's Rockstar, which was his second #1, blocking both Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez, and by the end of the year, he had 10 Grammy nominations. By the end of 2020, Roddy Ricch was the biggest artist in the world, but that might have been exactly his problem. At this point, Roddy couldn't be stopped. He made it to the top. But what if making it to the top is the same reason that he fell off? Of course, none of us can relate to the feeling of making it to the top, but if all your motivation is to make it to the top, and it not only drives the majority of your music, but you actually attain it, and you make all this money and gain all this fame, where does your drive and motivation go? For Roddy, unfortunately, he has never seemed to find it again. He took almost 2 years off and didn't return till the end of 2021 with Live Life Fast. And it wasn't great. Even though it debuted at #4, it only sold 62,000 first week. Not only a significant decline from 2019, but it received heavily mixed reviews. I personally didn't like it very much, and critics noted that it lacked a defined personality. After, fans were still hopeful that he would turn it around and release a project that was on par with 2019, but this simply wasn't the case. Since then, he has only dropped one project in a stretch of singles, and the latest has barely crossed 25 million streams on Spotify. And despite announcing a new album, there has still been no release date. When Roddy was asked what his motivation was pre-fame, he said it was therapy. When asked about his motivation post-fame, he said that he wants to take his time and that his goal was to feed the streets and that the mission was accomplished. Roddy had lost his direction, the final piece of this guide. The mission was accomplished, and that was the end of it. But this isn't how you build a long-lasting career. So there they are, the 6 reasons an artist falls off. But what if there's something deeper here? A deeper lesson that can be learned from this. The last reason in this guide, losing direction once arrived, didn't just impact Roddy Ricch. I used him as the clearest example, sure, but when you take a closer look, it actually plagues every single artist on this list. For SoFaygo, after Knock Knock, he waited 18 months. Then in 2025, he acknowledged he feels the fire again, implying that he had lost it. For Destroy Lonely, after blowing up in 2022, he built no additional layering and no additional branding. There was no motivation to. He had arrived. And as a result, when something bad happens, his shallow image shattered. For Lil Nas X, early in his career, he explicitly stated that he wanted to prove people wrong as the driving force. And he did. Once proven, 4 years of nothing. And combined with all the gimmicks, no wonder he fell off. For Lil Tjay, the goal was respect. He declared himself the greatest back in March 2021, but boasted about it so loudly and so aggressively that clearly the opposite was true. And once the culture turned, there was nothing to fall back on. For Polo G, he essentially accepted his complacency. His music never evolved. He had made it. His formulaic approach had hit #1. He was making 2,000 a minute. What else was there to do? And of course, there's Roddy Ricch, who in 2023 declared that the mission was accomplished. Every single one of these artists were orienting their goal striving and pursuing towards external factors. Status, money, fame, and they all achieved it. But once it was achieved, they had nowhere to go next. They hadn't thought that far. But instead of finding a deeper reason, a deeper purpose, a deeper love for what they did, for the craft, for the connection, for the community that they were building with their fans, they were never able to find it. And as a result, their careers went downhill. They couldn't find that drive or motivation to continue pushing the boundaries. Now, I'm not claiming that money or status as a motivator is bad. For all these artists, it worked in their favor. However, as the only motivator, it can have severe consequences once achieved. Because not only will you want more than what you already have, but if there's nothing underneath that to act as foundation, you'll start to drift, which is exactly what happened to all of these artists. 2 of them, Lil Nas X and Destroy Lonely, clearly have experienced mental health problems, despite all the money and the fame that they have achieved. And of course, I don't know much about their personal lives, but the human minds can be heavily impacted without a meaningful goal to strive for. And there's actually a name for this in psychology, the hedonic treadmill. Discovered by Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell in 1971, It is defined as the human tendency to quickly return to a stable baseline level of happiness despite major or positive life events. As you achieve new goals or acquire wealth, your expectations rise, resulting in a continuous cycle of striving without permanent gains in happiness. And this sounds eerily similar to what happened to all 6 of these artists. And at that point, the problem is no longer external, it's internal. And it is this dissatisfied internal state that likely led to their fall-offs. For all of them. I know what you're thinking. This is a guide to fall off. Why would you want that? What if avoiding every single reason for falling off in this guide was the secret to never falling off at all? Build your catalog, build real associations, and build on substance, not gimmicks. Be someone that people can root for and keep evolving. And above everything else, if there is only one thing you get from this entire video, find a reason to keep going that doesn't disappear the moment that you arrive. And there's one artist who has done exactly that. And whether you like him or not, he has built an incredible 20-year career and is one of the biggest artists in the world. And it is precisely because he has avoided each of these reasons. And who is that artist? Drake. Let's go through each reason in the guide. Reason 1. Nothing in the catalog to back up the hit. Before Drake's debut album, he had already released 3 mixtapes, a foundation. The third was So Far Gone, his 2009 release. And because of its fresh appeal and hit singles such as Best I Ever Had, it hit number 6 on the Billboard charts, went gold, and sparked a label bidding war, and mentorship from Lil Wayne. Then, only after all of this success, did he release his debut album, Thank Me Later, which of course, debuted at number 1. But what about reason 2? What about shitty controversy and bad branding? Well, only a year after his first number 1 album in 2010, Drake started OVO, beginning as a blog/merch venture. And it was a huge success. And only a year later, they formed OVO Sound, the record label, and had early signings such as Party Next Door. By 2013, he was named a global ambassador of the Toronto Raptors, and they even adopted black and gold jerseys in 2015. And also in 2015, he collaborated with Apple Music. But on top of his material accolades, when you think of Drake, there are so many things that come to mind. Toronto, the Raptors, OVO, Woman, his suave and aesthetic, the Kendrick beef. A career built on that many associations will never result in a fall off. It just has way too much depth. Now compare that to someone like Destroy Lonely, who really had nothing in addition to his music, and the fall off becomes obvious. But what about reason 3? What about marketing and blowing up through gimmicks? Early in his career, there was some real risk. At that point, he was both an actor and a rapper, and some of what they had him doing as an actor was gimmicky and did risk negative public perception. However, Drake didn't lean into it. There was no gimmick. But is Drake likable? Of course, this can be subjective, but I can confidently say that he isn't unlikable in the way that Lil Tjay is. And not only that, but he was one of the first to start singing on rap records and showing emotional vulnerability that people deemed soft. However, instead of defending himself and avoiding it, he leaned into it and made that sound his lane. Think about all the rappers we hear singing today. When comparing Drake's sound evolution with Polo G, it's incredibly obvious how well Drake has avoided this. He is constantly evolving his sound, and many of his albums sound different. This began with Thank Me Later and Take Care, where he really was one of the first to sing on a trap beat. A few years later, it evolved into projects like Views in 2016, which was more dancehall and Afrobeats, and One Dance is still his most popular song to this day. And then in 2022, he released a house/EDM pivot with Black Coffee and Gordo, two of the most respected electronic music producers in the game. And most recently, his latest trio, Iceman, Habibti, and Maid of Honor, all sound different. Drake is also constantly working with new artists, and many even criticize him of stealing their sounds. But each pivot has been essential for his longevity. Had his sound stayed exactly the same, like Polo G's, there was no way he would be where he is today. And the most important reason of all, reason 6, loss of direction and striving. Drake's goal striving throughout his career seems confusing at a first glance, but he has just kept going. It is impossible to argue against the fact that over the course of 20 years, he's released 14 albums, and hundreds of songs. Early in his career, when he first became famous, he didn't treat it like an arrival. He's quoted as saying, "No matter how good it is, it's just going to be an accomplishment, a stage to get past. Never my greatest hour." Through output and sound evolution alone, this has clearly stayed true throughout his entire career. But not only that, after the Kendrick beef, Drake was able to find new direction. He lost the beef, and now he had to prove everyone wrong, and it led to 3 albums at once. But whether Drake actually won or lost, the answer is a lot more complicated than you'd think.